We were talking about that Las Vegas in a lot of ways is very similar to Salt Lake in the sense that like people who go there think that Las Vegas is like, oh, so you must go to like the Mirage all the time. And it's like, no, I fucking don't. I haven't been down to the Strip in 5 years, right? And like, there's this sort of city out beyond that. Yeah. And then the same thing, people come to Salt Lake and they're like, well, you guys must just like tool around Temple Square on a regular basis. Like, no.
Whenever.
Never even go near there. Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's like that people just have this view of it from that, right?
Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people, making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
Welcome back to the I Am Salt Lake podcast. This is episode 89. My name is Chris Hollifield. Welcome to my show, everybody. Welcome to the podcast where I showcase Salt Lake City, the people inside of it, the bands, the musicians, the artists, the locals, the people that are making the city what it is today. So welcome to my show. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes. That way you do not miss a single episode, as I got some great interviews, some great people that I've talked to, and you're not going to want to miss out on a single episode. You can find all the links at iamsaltlake.com. This episode, I sit down with Adam Sherlock and Adam Palcher from A Damn Movie Podcast. We talk about their podcast. We talk about a short film that they got coming out very soon called Head Over Heels. And we find out about that. We find out about them as individuals, some different projects that they've been up to. One thing I do want to mention before I go any further, during the conversation, they did not have a place at that time where a venue for them to show the film Head Over Heels, but they've found a venue, Kilby Court. They're going to be showing the film Sunday, September 15th at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. So you're going to want to make sure to check that out. Go to A Damn Movie Podcast, their website. I'm going to put all the links at iamsaltlake.com/episode 89. I'm going to put a preview for the film right there. You could check that out. I'll post more links as we get closer to that date so you can find out more about that event. But Sunday, September 15th, they're going to have a film premiere for that, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. at Kilby Court. That's in downtown Salt Lake City. So you're going to want to make sure to not miss out on that. So make sure you follow me on Twitter at iamsaltlake. I'll keep you guys up to date on all that information and everything else going on in Salt Lake City. So anyways, with that being said, let's jump into that conversation that I had with Adam and Adam from A Damn Movie Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and thank you for listening to another episode of the I Am Salt Lake Podcast.
I am Adam Sherlock. I'm Adam Sherlock, and
I'm Adam Palcher.
And this is Adam Palcher. And we met each other, I think, we got to know each other at Kilby Court. I think we actually met at some random punk show somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was the Sandkicker show.
Was it?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Met there, ended up becoming friends, lived together for a while.
At Kilby.
At Kilby Court, yeah.
You lived at Kilby Court?
Yeah.
Well, I think, not together the whole time, but off and on probably 4 or 5 years.
Like in one of the houses there?
No, in the warehouse in the back.
Really?
Yeah, where the bathrooms are.
Yep, that's where
back behind there used to be an apartment.
He just started shacking up one day. He's like, hey, so I'm moving in.
Well, to be fair, we
bill $50 a month.
It's true. You know what I was thinking about that the other day. You know what's the most fucked up part about that? Is that my rent at one time in that place was $50. Well, I think it made it up to like $75 a month. Yeah. And sometimes I couldn't make it. Sometimes I couldn't make the $75. I was like, oh man. And it's like, now I think about it, I'm like, I pay like $975 a month and don't ever think about it.
To be fair,
at 22, I know. At 22, I was like, oh fuck, where am I going to get $75? But anyway, so we both lived down there. I was doing a lot of I was playing in a lot of bands, doing a lot of spoken word stuff and things like that. Palcher was doing a label that actually released a record of
a local compilation.
What label?
My Sweet Records.
Okay.
Yeah, My Sweet Records.
I remember that label. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Palcher's, and so there was always this like idea of like we wanted to do stuff, we wanted to do something.
Couldn't find the right medium though.
Yeah, and obviously, I still play in bands, I still do spoken word stuff, but
what bands are you in now?
I play in the Pleasure Thieves with Lance Saunders, who actually runs Kilby. So, full circle.
There you go.
Hakuna Matata.
Small Lake City.
Small Lake City, damn right. And so, I think that once we both had kind of grown up a little bit, both moved off the street, we would always
not literally the street, Kilby Court, the street.
Yeah, we weren't living on the street, but we would always it was something that we would just regularly do, was like get together, have beers, talk about movies or complain about movies, or just this, this kind of a conversational
stuff,
thing.
Yeah.
But I think that what happened was you get a little bit older, you get married or whatever, and you don't have nearly as much time
to get together
and do that,
to pal around.
Right. And so
it kind of became our excuse to hang out.
It became our excuse to hang out. We were both starting to listen to podcasts a lot. This was 2008.
Because you've been doing your podcast now 5 years. You've been doing the podcast.
Over 5 years.
March 2007.
I mean, podcasts really haven't been around much longer, have
No,
they?
not really. I mean,
you were kind of the beginning.
The ones I knew about that were around, or the ones I knew about that were around nationally at the time, the Ricky Gervais Show, Smodcast, and that's kind of it. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot more that I knew of. There was a great British podcast.
I remember it. What was that called?
Movies You Should See from Simply Syndication. That was the first one I ever heard where it was like they had a group full of people and they would review movies, and they wouldn't necessarily do it in any kind of in order of like recent releases and things like that. Like obviously there's stuff like Film Spotting that was out there, but Movies You Should See, I remember that was like, I saw that they had reviewed 7, and I was like, oh, awesome. And so I went and listened to it. I saw that they had reviewed Roadhouse, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like what does somebody today think about going back and watching Roadhouse? And like, that was something that I always loved about like Roger Ebert's website, is that you could go back through and see all these reviews like he did like in the 80s, and like what that movie was like to him then. And so that's why we just decided like we should just do a show like this. And if we review something new, then great, but we're not really. Yeah,
because you guys don't always do new reviews, right?
Very rarely.
You almost kind of never.
And that's what I like about it. I was like,
I mean,
the ones I've listened to, I haven't listened to almost 200 episodes. You're coming up pretty quick,
getting
right?
very close. We're about a month away from that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
That's
crazy.
It's kind of a milestone for any podcast, I think.
I know, and that's what taking like.
See, when I hit episode 5, I felt like it was a milestone. You know what I mean?
It was just like the whole time. That's for sure. Yeah, it took a while for us to get the format down that we thought worked, and the banter back and forth of talking to each other without thinking the mic's on and that kind of stuff.
I used to be so terrified of
close to 1,000 movies, right?
Oh yeah. I used to be so terrified of like dead air, like just constantly. Like if there was like, I would sit and edit through them and like staring at the waveform and seeing like if there was like a flat line in the waveform. I'm like, what's that? Did one of us go? And I forgot what I was going to say, because that would that would happen a lot. Like the first like 50 episodes.
By 200, we got it down.
Yeah, we're all right. We really sound like we like each other.
Yeah.
It's a bromance. Yeah.
What's been the most rewarding thing, do you think, doing a podcast?
Well, I think for me, one, it's definitely hanging out with my best friend and just bullshitting. Like, that's just, we have a rapport with each other, like a big brother, little brother thing that we've always had. I think, two, and I went to film school. I think I've learned more doing the podcast about film, and
it's made you become like an expert almost in the field.
Well, just understanding what works, what doesn't, why it doesn't, why certain directors do certain things, or that kind of stuff, and like what holds true 40 years. Like we just reviewed a movie from the 1940s that we both were blown away by, and it's just, why is that still relevant? Why does it still work as a formulaic thing, as a storytelling thing? So honestly, like going to film school and then having the podcast, I've learned more by just watching movies and being inspired by some of the things I've seen than I ever did in film school. But film school has also changed a lot since I graduated. I graduated in like 2002, and technology is totally different now. So film school would be a lot more hands-on. There's a lot more to do. But
where'd you go to film school?
Just the U.
Up at the U?
Yep, just up at the U for Yeah, it's right after I graduated high school.
And did you both go to film school or no?
No.
Barely out of high school. This
Barely just made it out of high school.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. No, I actually,
No.
I actually work in education, but
That is the
so it's
funniest
probably
part.
not a good thing to say. I think if I had to look at something that, like the biggest, the most rewarding thing that I've gotten from the podcast, I think it's that when you're younger, the things that you like or the things that you think are bullshit, like form who you are, right? You're going to be the iconoclast and be like, I'm not going to go watch that Steven Spielberg bullshit Jurassic Park. That's such bullshit. It's not even real. Right. Whatever the thing is that you choose to latch onto when you're younger. And I think for all three of us, and we were talking about this, before we started the show, kind of growing up in the sort of punk world. And, you get used to being this iconoclast in that way. And you get older. And I think that edge starts to dull a little bit just because you don't have, well,
you've been through the ringer.
Well,
man.
and there's a myriad of reasons. So one, you've been through the ringer, but also two, I think
you're old and worn out.
Yeah, well, worn out. Pop culture doesn't matter anymore to, the more times that you start to make a reference about something and realize that you're surrounded by like kids that don't get your reference, you're like, oh, I guess it doesn't matter if I'm angry about that anymore. I don't have the energy to constantly like be arguing about these things or thinking that things suck. So what I've found is that, and I definitely held that opinion in really big regard when I was younger, that like, I love to just sit and just bitch about why this sucks or why that sucks. And that was really important to me for a long time. And I think doing a show where I'm forced to, whatever the movie is, whatever era it's from, whatever predetermined ideas I might think that I have about a genre that I don't like, whether it be musicals or westerns or whatever, right? Like that I have to go, well, no, I have to watch this. And if I really don't like it, why don't I like it? And I think that I've looked more, and I mean, and it's like, it's a form of media literacy. It's like, I'm suddenly literate in this form that I thought I knew forever, right? I thought that like by watching so many movies and having such passionate opinions that I really got it. And it's
you were the expert.
Yeah.
You were all knowing.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally like, oh,
now we can actually back it up.
Well, yeah, right. I still don't know about that. But the one thing I can say is that I really know now why I like something rather than it being an easy thing to say, screw romantic comedies. I would never watch that. And having to really sit and watch it and be like, well, I don't like this one and here's why it didn't work. Sort of like what you were saying.
Well, and I think it's a little, anyone can just review whatever movies are coming out next week or whatever. But I think it's more fun to be able to pick the ones we want to do, ones we have something to say about, and ones that kind of have sat there for 20 years and we can revisit. And you have a much different view of a movie 20 years later than you do the week it comes out,
Well, and I think
I loved the first remake of the new Star Wars when it came out. But now I watch it now and I'm just, the new, not A New Hope, but the episode 4 or whatever, the newest Star Wars with the remakes. The ones with Jar Jar and shit.
Yeah,
at first
Phantom
I was like,
Menace.
this is great. And I went and watched it. And then after a while, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, I know, right?
Worst story
Drinking the Kool-Aid. And all of a sudden,
exactly.
Well, but and that goes back again to sort of what I was saying is that I think when you're younger, you develop these opinions about things, and in the same way as like when the newer Indiana Jones came out, at first I was like, man, like they ruined it. And then I sat there for a minute. I was like, actually, in a lot of ways, the first three have some pretty stupid premises too.
It's true.
You got to just let go of it.
But
and we were children.
There were so many memories of your childhood.
Yes, and it's like, and you don't want to fuck with nostalgia, right? Don't go near nostalgia because oh my god, you might find out that like
it was horrible.
It was always that awful. Yeah, exactly. Like my bedroom was this small, but I could line all my G.I. Joes up against the wall. There's no way it could have been that small. But I think that the other part of that too is that like say for like directors, like going through rather than just if we were doing consecutive new stuff that came out. It's like going back and checking out a director and committing to, for those of you that, maybe haven't heard the show, shame on you. First, but then
this podcast.
Listen to that, silky voice.
We do we do film festivals where we choose 5 movies and base it around either a genre, a director, actor sometimes, or some really weird, predisposed
it's
idea
more for
that
us
we come
too,
up
for
with.
our education.
Yeah, and so
it's usually shit we haven't seen.
But sometimes when you pick one and you're like, oh, that'd be so stupid if we did that, and then we're like, let's do it then. So you get things like a Tony Scott festival, which when you think about it, you're like, that's ridiculous. But then you really start thinking about it, you're like, wait, we get to do True Romance.
Man on
We
Fire.
get to do
Great
Man
movie.
on Fire.
Yeah.
We get to do Top Gun.
Yeah.
You get to do Last Boy Scout. Like all of a sudden you're talking about these movies that normally if you said Tony Scott, somebody would throw that out there as the punchline to the end of a joke. When you start thinking about it, you're like, oh my God, these are cultural touchstones from like the last 25 years. Right. And where all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, Damon Wayans was supposed to be like the next hot shot shit, right? And instead you're like, where the fuck is he at now? Like it totally fizzled, But here's this movie, Last Boy Scout, where like, oh my God, look at him. Like he's totally supposed to be the
Written by
badass
Shane
here.
Black.
Yeah. But you get
a
these
great
little
one.
things you would never normally think about. And then you have to sort of almost wax philosophical for a half an hour about it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you realize that, especially for people like us, I think pop culture still is the thing that defines you, and that when you start looking at it, what's another good one?
Joe
Dick,
Dante.
well, I was going to say Dick flicks.
Oh, yeah.
When we did, which is like, you got the chick flicks, right? Where it's like all stereotypical stuff like, girls love that. So Dick flicks is Commando, Bloodsport, help me out here, Lethal Weapon,
Die Hard.
Die Hard.
that
Yes,
was one.
that was one of
See?
them. And so, but once you start looking at that, all of a sudden there's this
Theme,
undercurrent under all of it of like, wow, look at the way that we portrayed what it meant to be a man in the 1980s. And then you had these like ridiculous premise films that grown men with grown men jobs were spending their grown man job money to go and watch this movie and be like, it's so badass. I wish I had a gun like that. And you're like, are you 12? Like, really? Like, but it's amazing. And like,
But again, it goes back to wanting to relive your childhood.
yes,
That
totally.
young child where you had the most badass gun.
Exactly. Yes. And that somehow and then this was a staple of 80s machismo movies was that, it's almost like a G.I. Joe character. It's like they're gunned to find who they were.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Well, and
you just love that. It's such an 80s thing.
Well, and I think too, something we really try to do with the show, rather than trying to be super relevant of what's coming out, is more basing a theme around each show and picking 2 movies that really are similar or meld together or kind of inspired each other, or one inspired the other, and then we try and do a top 5 at the end. Top 5 is kind of, especially with podcasts, it's easy. Everyone loves making lists,
Oh yeah.
And so we definitely took advantage of that. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk about a ton of other movies that we wouldn't necessarily review or talk about. But so it's really nice to have a theme. And we really usually get a lot of compliments from emailed listeners about, I really like how I matched these 2, and suggestions on future shows and that kind of stuff.
Well, and the other part of that too is that I think when you do the top 5, oftentimes it suddenly you realize that you've created this fully formed episode without actually having to put that much thought into it. So for example, you have the Dick Flicks Festival, and so one of them is Bloodsport, right? And then you go, what could we match with Bloodsport that's maybe more relevant, more people know about? And you go, well, JCVD, right? Like that very meta Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that was made in 2009.
Yeah, something like
I think. I don't know if you've seen that.
I don't think I have.
Ooh,
Filmed
see it.
beautifully. He actually is
fucking great.
playing himself in it, and he's a fantastic actor in this movie. And it's funny, and it's sad, and it's strange, and it's just an awesome movie.
He has like this insane monologue.
This monologue in the middle where he looks right at the camera, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, he's like giving me chills.
Yeah,
Jean-Claude Van Damme can
he's not
act.
breaking anyone's neck.
Yeah, exactly. And so you do Bloodsport, then you add that in, and then you do a top 5 washed up actors, right? And so all of a sudden you've created this narrative over the entire episode where each part of it sort of plugs into itself. And so, and some of them work out better than others. But
Well, what I like about your podcast is that it's not like a lot of movie podcasts are about new movies.
Right.
So it's like you can go back and you can listen and it's like, oh, that is kind of, it's fun to hear about the older movies at any time point in life.
Exactly. Yeah. And we usually spoil
so
too.
it's almost like, the evergreen content that,
totally.
where it's always relevant. It's always fun to hear somebody else's opinion on Die Hard or on, what's another ridiculous movie? Zoolander or something
totally.
like that,
Well, and I mean, and things come back, right? Like, I think that whether that somebody, they're remaking everything. And so,
of course, well, you got to recash in.
You got to and so, but, to go back and say, well, what made this movie, quote unquote, worthy of the remake? Or, like we did, Point Break, and I think it was only like,
we haven't done Point Break.
You haven't done Point Break.
Or no, it wasn't Point Break. What did we do?
Point Break is one of the best movies ever made.
What did we do that had Patrick Swayze we were talking about?
Dirty Dancing.
No, it was something else recently.
Well, I just remember that we did something, and it was like right around the time that he passed away, remember? And so we got the opportunity to actually talk about it
been
at length.
Was he in Ghost? No.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like not a cool movie now at all because like
Whoopi Goldberg.
Well, no, just because now it's like it really happened.
It
really is a ghost now. I just hope
but
he
at
got
the time it was a great
it was
movie.
awesome. I just hope he got the beam of light and not the things that come out and drag him into the shadows. Those things were scary.
I agree. That movie was scary at the time.
So how often do you guys put out a podcast? Do you guys have a schedule at all? Or
we used to do,
or is it just kind of whenever the hell you feel like it?
Yeah, I mean, we used to do it once a week. We're trying to get back to doing it once a week again. It's hard.
Yeah, life gets in the way sometimes for sure.
Well, because you have to watch 2 movies for each episode, right? And so,
so do you guys get together and watch them? Or
no, we watch them. Yeah, we have to watch them apart.
Yeah, we really don't.
You're not allowed to watch them together.
Yeah. Well,
it's usually I mean, we've gone to movies together that are in theaters that we want to talk about.
Yeah, but
that's very cute.
Well, it's cute until like the very ending, and then I think a bystander might be like, "Oh, the date didn't work," because we won't talk to each other on the way out because you just finished watching The Dark Knight, and so you're like, "Okay, we'll see you on Tuesday."
I'm sure someone like
you don't want to like,
it was awesome. You don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, because we like to.
I'm sure like Jimmy and Jeff from Big Movie Mouth.
Yeah.
They're just kind of awkward for you're like, all right, I'll see you later, and just leave.
Right.
It's just like you don't want to spoil anything or see the reaction. Like we did something, and you're like, I did not think when we walked out that you thought that about that movie.
I know you played it off really well.
I tried to.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know why that matters, but
so you have to watch 2 movies an episode,
right?
And so only 2. I thought you did more than 2 movies on an episode, like review them, or is it just
just the 2 movies for the review?
Movie,
oh, okay,
and then top 5.
And then the top 5.
Oh, top 5.
So we just do 2 movies at a time. But I mean, like once you add in the show, that's like 6 hours a week.
We don't always have a top 5.
We both have
like,
careers.
Sometimes,
like, oh my God.
We do listener feedback or like an interview at Sundance. I've had a handful of those and just random stuff that we can kind of plug in because the top 5 thing can get kind of old sometimes. We're just like, and we have this rule that we came up with for some reason, probably because we talk about it too much, but we can't put something on our top 5 that we reviewed.
I gotcha.
We just did like top 5 dance scenes and something like the dance scene in Pulp Fiction would be awesome to put on there, but we've already reviewed Pulp Fiction,
the movie. Yeah.
So we're just like, oh, but it kind of forces us to think outside the box and do something different. And for us, really, we wouldn't call ourselves film critics. I think we are just
film lovers.
Yeah, we're just lovers with it, and good friends that love bullshitting.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit. You made an interesting comment about putting time into a podcast. And for people listening that don't realize how much time some podcasters put into their shows, and we're doing it for free.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
labor
like
love.
It's because it's a passion project usually. I mean, just that alone, everybody should listen to.
Well, and I found
as many podcasts as you can listen to.
I found that back when I was mentioning earlier, back when I was doing construction work, and the podcasting thing was this fun little sort of side thing that I did. Then I didn't care, and it was cool going in and editing stuff and doing all that. And I was like, it takes a while, but I don't care.
Well, it ended up getting him a real job.
Yeah. So my job,
So
our podcast,
podcasting led you to like something.
Part of my job is actually podcasting.
Yeah, really?
So at Spy Hop, I work with incarcerated youth, helping them tell radio stories.
Okay.
And then they turn those into podcasts. And so I'll help with the entire editing process
Really?
and the storytelling and all that.
Now,
and so it's on iTunes.
Is it kind of like NPR StoryCorps? Like
Yeah,
kinda like
it's
that,
actually
where
more
little stories, little clippets.
It's more like This American Life because we theme it.
I love it.
And so there's like 7 or 8 different little stories from all these incarcerated youth. So they're actually in corrections. I drag in a little portable studio twice a week. And that's
So you
what
go
we
talk
do,
to youth in jail.
Yeah, and they actually I bring in a basically a little wagon full of MacBook Pros and little mixing boards and microphones and
do they have a pretty good response with that? Or,
oh yeah,
I mean, people,
they love it. It's
called Sending Messages.
It's called
by the
Sending
way.
Messages. Yeah, it's plugging
Might
it.
wanna
So
say-
that's the name of the show.
The name of the show is Sending Messages. Yeah,
And you can find it on iTunes. I mean, not to get away from your guys'
Yeah,
podcast.
no,
but
no, please.
I want to listen to this.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Super interesting.
I'm familiar with Spy Hop to a degree.
Well, and the
But-
kids have such amazing stories.
Oh my God. Yeah. Don't listen to too many of them in a row. People break down for sure. 'Cause
Really?
they're rugged.
Like how long is an episode usually?
Usually about 40 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
So good little listen, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And so, but the funny part is that once I started doing that, now that I get paid to do that, I fucking hate editing the movie review show. I hate editing our show.
You do? I didn't know that.
Well, it's because I'm like, I mean, it's fine and I do it and I want it to sound really good, but I'm just like, man, I already spent all day at work doing this. You know what I mean? Like it
That's
doesn't,
true.
the novelty has changed a little
You
bit.
don't want to,
Yeah. I'm like, oh no, I got to do it for free when I get
Like when you did
home.
construction, you want to go home and build a cabinet.
Oh my God, my house was falling apart when I was doing construction. So I'm just like, you know, honey, I know the sheetrock is bubbling up, but we're just going to have to live with it. That's the landlord's job. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting that I bought a Mac, had GarageBand on it, messed around making music on there. And then it was like, oh, there's a podcasting feature, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then, you know,
Plus,
a
he's
couple
got the
years.
voice. Come on. The voice is.
Ooh, silky
The
smooth.
voice is sexy.
The voice is sexy, especially
You
when
can
you
do
get rid
the
of
Don LaFontaine too. Like
I do,
nobody's
yeah.
business.
In a world,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Pretty.
Let's hear it.
I just did one for let's see. In a world. But I don't have anything else to say. One man stands alone. The interesting thing is that I just did that for what is it? Mediocre show.
Mediocre show.
Yeah, mediocre show. I just
Those are great guys.
I
I'm
was
actually this podcast is part of their radio network.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
did for Jeff Anderson and Andy Patterson. I was just over at Patterson's and
for the new intro song.
Yeah, the new intro.
Yeah,
I think they're going to use me doing that Don LaFontaine for the new intro.
Really?
I think so.
Yeah, well,
So
that's great. They'll get a kick out of hearing this.
Yeah, definitely.
You also did the radio spot for the Halloween,
the local haunted house.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, what was it?
the one off of I-15,
Fear. Yeah, that was
the one that
Fear
they
one.
made the old warehouse into.
Fear Factory.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I do their radio spots every year.
Yeah, that's
Right on.
It's a fun little
and
extra gig.
you think doing the podcast has led you into being able to do that, or
Yeah,
has a voice.
yeah. Well, and I mean, and I did before doing the podcast. I did some voice acting
Okay.
here and there. There is a
And did you go to school for any of that, or
no, not really. I'm just a ham. I'm just a jerk. So I'm like always doing silly voices and stuff. So I did there's a whole series of infomercials. What about 4 years ago? The Citronella Bug Band thing, and they would have me do like a Billy Mays style, like fast talking like this, and you want to let them know that, and like this whole thing with the Citronella Bug Band. And they were going to go into doing video.
Yeah, yeah.
And I actually auditioned in front of a green screen. I had
look too much like Billy.
I had a little mark and I could stand on it. I think they ran out of money.
Have you guys thought about doing a video like with your podcast, kind of like how it goes back to you're mentioning Jimmy and Jeff, how they do with their
really.
big movie Mouth Off, kind of a YouTube site.
I don't know.
How is it watching people talk though? I don't know. Like
I guess I haven't really thought about it much
Because that's not how you go after your content.
Yeah, kind of.
Because I don't sit around and watch YouTube videos, but I know there's this big market.
There definitely is.
On YouTube.
There definitely
But it's like, I just download it on my iPhone, and then when I'm driving around or put my headphones in.
And that's it. That's the vehicle.
I'm not going to drive around and look at my
Yeah, exactly.
I'm saying it's the same thing.
Yeah, I'm used to like
accident. Or
something. Exactly. Like, sorry, I was trying to watch this show on my phone. But
trying to get the most out of my money with Netflix.
Exactly right. I think that for me, again, I think that it's because I multitask, and so I'm always doing something and have a podcast going. And so to me, again, it's that same thing. Like I see that as almost more of an anchor rather than a freeing way for people to experience us more.
Do you remember the first podcast you ever listened to? Yeah. What was the first podcast that you ever listened to?
Me, it was Ricky Gervais. I'm pretty sure.
Even if it was the worst podcast ever. Even if it was like some self-help.
No, I think that the first one I actually listened to before I knew about the feature on iTunes and doing all of it that way, I think it was probably downloading This American Life and being like, oh, this is awesome. Now it's on my iPod and I can listen to it whenever I want, and it was that aspect of like, oh, I don't have to like tune in at a specific time and listen to this. Yeah. And so probably that, but beyond that, I'd say probably the first one it was probably the Ricky Gervais show. It was probably the first one that
shit was so funny.
It was pretty amazing.
Well, it's the first like free form show that you're like, they're not really talking about anything.
Yeah.
And it's still
just a bunch
super entertaining.
People.
And I did in the beginning of a damn movie podcast, I did a free form show for about a year called I Know Everything.
Really?
Yeah. And,
it's pretty amazing.
You know what? Actually, I think somebody told me about that podcast.
Really? It caught on, and there's actually a Mediocre show connection there too. It caught on.
Well, yeah, I think it was Eric from the Mediocre show was telling me about that show.
Yeah, that probably was, and I loved doing that show. Again, it was a lot. That one was the most amount of work to edit of anything I've ever done like that before, because we would go fully freeform. We never mentioned an audience. We never talked to an audience. We just talked to each other. And we didn't even introduce the show. I had like a robotic, like Stephen Hawking kind of voice, introduce the show and introduce the chapters for the show. So for every episode, there was probably at least an hour and a half to 2 hours of editing that would have to go into doing each one. The reason why we stopped.
That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. I mean, I'm really proud of the show, but I also pretty much destroyed it.
What was the premise of the show?
Nothing. Pretty much the premise of it was really whatever we ended up talking about at the time, but we tried to kind of steer away from
reading news headlines.
Yeah, it wasn't things like that. It was more like there's one about how do you wipe after you take a dump? And everybody in the room has to talk about how they do it. And it gets into some pretty gory details, but
so it wasn't just you. There was multiple.
There was a group. Yeah, there was a group. It was me, my friend Levi, Andy Patterson. It was usually the three of us. Very, very cool stuff. But this was before I started working with kids, and I thought I would just work in construction forever. And so it was like, zero fear, man. Divulge everything, man. Like, air out all your dirty laundry. So it was like,
did stuff come back and bite you in the ass?
No, I luckily, and I can say this right now, kids, you can destroy something from the internet. It takes a while and you have to send a lot of emails, but it can be done. And it didn't, I was able to proactively get rid of it before it did. My boss, basically told me, he said, if you're worried about students or potential donors or parents or whomever eventually finding this and not really getting your sense of humor the way that you're trying to portray it, he's like, you're right. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because teenagers are digital natives, right? They understand. And they're going to
Google this guy.
Yeah, of course, right? It's the first thing that they would do.
Yeah.
Well, I've been told by bosses all the time, I Googled you before,
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's totally that's just part of the world we live in now. And not that there was anything that was incriminating on the show, but, one man's funny, dirty joke is another person's sad tragedy of something that actually happened in their life.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to be a spokesperson for an organization that's trying to work with youth and do all these things, I was like, wow, this suddenly became wildly inappropriate.
Well, our show goes off on enough tangents.
There's definitely some dick and fart jokes in there for sure, but nothing that's nothing at anybody's expense, and and nothing.
There's some people's expense.
Okay, that's true.
You don't like Tom Cruise. It's at his expense.
Oh, come on, maybe. I don't dislike him. I just think he's gay. I don't think that that's disparaging at all to say that.
So you've been doing podcasts for a while. I mean, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to start one? What do you know now that you wish you would have known in the beginning?
Find your own voice. Do something different.
Yeah.
Do something that you haven't heard yet. That's why I was really proud of I Know Everything. It's why I'm so proud of a Damn Movie Podcast. It's why I'm really proud of being the executive producer for Sending Messages. You know, it's like if you're going to start a band, it's like if the last 5 bands that you were in sound like Lungfish, like don't make your 6th band sound like Lungfish.
Dude, that's why I got burned out of music. Honestly,
right, exactly.
Honestly, it's like they all sound the
same. And you're and it's like, yeah, exactly. And so if you're like, oh, I love that band, so my band's going to sound exactly like that band. It's like, no, find your own thing, you know. But
sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah,
no, it definitely does.
Especially
in
podcasting. I mean, I've even seen myself where it's like I have to figure out, okay, what am I doing?
Right.
And it might take a year or two.
No, totally. Well, and just like with anything, right? Like if you were writing short stories or if you were, you know, filming short films, like anything like that, you're going to see not only your continued growth, but I think the more risks that you take, you start to get a feel for what works because, and this is my favorite, and this is going to make me sound like I'm 400 years old, but my favorite part about podcasts is that when I would play in bands and, you know, I mean, I really tried to do that thing. We went on tour for, you know, months at a time across the US and back again. And you'd play a show and people would come up to you after and, oh, that was good. And you're like, thanks. What'd you like about it? Oh, I don't know. You guys kick ass. All right, bye. And they leave. And that's the last of the feedback that you get. And rarely you even get it really from your friends.
Yeah.
And you're sort of left in this zone of like, well, I think I believe in what I'm doing. And the greatest part about doing art, doing expression that exists online is that not only does it, and that's the key phrase, exist. It exists online, right? It's not in a vacuum. And it's also not just thrown out into the abyss. There's people constantly listening to when we reviewed Old Boy. There's people constantly listening to when we reviewed The Wicker Man. And those people are writing into us currently, and not just from Salt Lake. They're writing in from like Poland, Australia.
And isn't that awesome?
You know,
you're just like, well, it blows your fucking mind.
And I don't have to do anything. I literally just have to be like upload, and then like, you know, I might not even have pants
My
on.
advice to someone starting a podcast is beer does not always make you funny.
Yeah.
There's so many podcasts.
Just makes you burp a lot,
Yeah. There's so many podcasts out there where by the end of the show, people are pretty faded.
Yeah.
And not saying we haven't done that before. We definitely have. But I think we could hold our liquor a little. We know kind of a limit.
Well, maybe. I also think that that's a really astute observation, actually. And I would agree that not only does it not necessarily make you funny, but, and I've heard
loosens
podcasts,
you up, obviously, but
even podcasts I like a lot. I've heard hosts yawn.
Really?
Nothing fucking pisses me off more. Guys I'm friends with, and I've told them, I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Do not do that. Because even if what you were talking about, the topic you were talking about, I'm interested in, the second that I think that this is just old hat for you, or you're going through the motions, guess what, man? I'm pulling out and I'm going to go find a new show, because I don't, you have to be enthusiastic. You have to feel like each one, like, this is going to be the best one.
Well, I think Smodcast kind of got there because Kevin Smith started smoking a ton of weed.
Well, and he's doing like 75 different shows. It's like, how much more can this guy possibly talk about Batman? And I say that as a fan. I'm just like, but you know what? The same thing, the show that I mentioned earlier, Simply Syndicated, that was this one, that was the first one that I ever, this Movies You Should See podcast from England. Same thing happened with those guys. The movie review show blew up for them. So all of the hosts started doing like, let's review books over here. And we're going to review Doctor Who over here. And we're going to review this. And pretty soon they had this family of like 15 different shows. And you know what happened? The original
show collapsed, or
the original show, they're still doing it, but the original landmark show, Movies You Should See, is so boring now, where there's periods where there's, and I'm not talking shit, because I still think the people, they were, it was a landmark thing that they did. But it just, I think that you lose energy.
Yeah.
Right? If you try and spread out that
Bite
fast.
off more than you could chew.
Yeah.
Just do what you can handle. Do you guys ever interview people on your show at all?
Yeah,
Have you ever
sometimes.
done any interviews?
Yeah, we've done a couple local directors. I've done a handful of people at Sundance that I just kind of liked their movies and had something to talk to them about.
Yeah, so Suzanne Beery, you got to interview.
Yeah, she's
who is
amazing.
not Park Chan.
Park Chan
Wook.
No, not
Who was
Park Chan
it?
Wook. Oh, I can't remember his name.
That did I Saw the Devil.
Yeah, I Saw the Devil, that
Right.
guy. Ed Helms, I did one. I was supposed to interview Bill Murray once, but
I've heard stories
he
about
didn't make
Bill
it.
Murray bailing
Yeah.
out, Sundance.
I was
right?
super nervous for that one.
Yeah,
But
I can imagine. Bill Murray, come on.
Yeah. Totally, I
and,
know,
and
right?
Robert Duvall was
It's
supposed to be
Venkman.
there too. And
It's Groundhog
It is. I
Day.
honestly, I've never been more nervous.
Yeah.
I was waiting for him to walk in because that's the one thing. Like, I can go somewhere and prepare for an interview, but it's like, what do you ask Bill Murray that he hasn't been asked before?
You know, if he's notorious for ditching out, they should have a guy that
He
travels
hurt his
with
knee
him.
or something apparently.
But they
So
should have a guy that travels with him that looks like him.
I like it. Yeah,
To walk in and
His
tell you
brother.
Bill Murray's not going to be
he's
there.
got a couple brothers.
But I'm just saying, if they should have a guy that on first glance looks just like Bill Murray to walk in, so you go, and then he goes, "Hey, Bill isn't feeling good. He's not going to be able to make it." And you're like, "Oh my God."
So before we get too far, I want to talk to you guys about the films that you've done. You've done some films. Now, is that a group effort or is that
Yeah.
Talk a little. I mean, what made you decide to start producing films, start making films, and how many have you done?
We're releasing our second film in September. It's just a short film.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've kind of always wanted to do, I guess, a little bit, but especially after doing the podcast and really starting to understand, like I said before, what works, what doesn't. I've done a few things. I went to film school, like I said, done 48-hour film fest and just random stuff here and there, and worked on a few shows as a PA and stuff like that. And our first one was named Harlan, and it was about a serial killer who contacts this serial killer blogger and wants to turn himself in, but he's been notoriously disappeared for years, and nobody really ever could find this guy.
So it's found footage style.
Yeah, it's kind of documentary.
And this
found
one's
footage.
this is
And
more.
when did you put this out? Like what time did you? Was
Last
this
year?
Last year. Okay.
Yeah, last year. And this is definitely, I helped him out with some ideas.
Yeah, I
and
came to
a
him with
couple
the
things,
script.
but it was really, I got involved in all this because he like sort of dragged me along into it because, well, I think there was for so long that you were like, dude, did you read that script I gave to you yet? No, man, I'm totally going to. And then it would be like, a year later, he's
But
like,
you
dude,
actually
seriously,
responded to
come
the
on.
script, though. You responded.
It's true. Well, I've always written. Like ever since I was a kid, I've always written short stories and done zines and done all kinds of stuff like that, and have done a lot of spoken word storytelling pieces. And so that part of it really appealed to me in terms of the narrative storytelling,
Setting the tone.
setting the tone or dialogue and things like that. And so that's mainly where I kind of came in helping out.
Yeah, and I got it funded through Kickstarter, that first one, and did that whole thing and did the whole process of giving people rewards and all that stuff. And we ended up meeting our goal and making the movie. And
Stars Ryan Jensen from Corleones and Val Blue Shades.
Oh, nice, nice.
and if you've
nice.
ever seen Ryan Jensen, he's
Makes an awesome serial killer.
I got to get Ryan Jensen on the podcast.
We just had him on, and it was like
Was he on your guys'
he was
podcast?
just on our show.
Really?
We
he's
reviewed.
been bugging us for years.
We reviewed the B movie, The Stuff, and
Trapped in the Closet.
the R. Kelly movie, and it was basically like we had just brought a wild lion in to be
We
like
got amazing
okay,
feedback from people. Like,
people were like,
But you gotta
oh my
rein him in.
God, like you
gotta
do,
rein
you have to rein him in. But that's part of his charm.
Yeah. No, he's just a crazy guy. So anyways,
and
the
he's
film.
also 6'8" and has a hair lip, which helps as well for as far as visual appeal of a serial killer.
And he just has a great presence, definitely.
Yeah,
did
and
an awesome job. And
very
I actually,
creepy. We went for the creepy factor, and then we finished that, tried to put it on the festival circuit and all that stuff. Then we had a kind of a loose idea for this new one, and I kind of wrote half a script and gave it to you. I'm like, I need like an ending or something. He ended up just kind of taking over the script, and we kind of collaborated and wrote this new one, which I think is way different than the other one. But it's a bit more evolved. It's more of a film rather than like handheld.
Yeah, well, and where the first time around doing found footage style, you want to try and find locations that look good for it. Went up to Andy Patterson's family's cabin.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
In Oakley, and it's actually their cabin is very nice, but next to it they have a garage that I think used to be the old cabin, and there's all this really creepy old furniture in it, and like raccoons that live up there, and it's pretty terrifying.
We were the second day of shooting. We were up there cleaning up rat
and
shit.
it's just like, are we going to get hantavirus? We are, aren't we?
Living the dream.
Exactly. And so, and so it had this great sort of stark look to it. But again, found footage style, you do the shaky handheld look to it, where a lot of times it might have even been me holding the camera, because I played the other character that was supposed to be the one filming. And so, we weren't very concerned with, or we were concerned with the look and feel of it, but that look and feel was supposed to feel amateur. And so in a way that was easy. The hardest part about it was being out in the sun. For this film, Head Over Heels, Mike Skurs, we got to do a shout out to Mike Skurs. He was the cinematographer and director of photography. And wow, man,
it looked beautiful.
It looks gorgeous.
We found a great location.
It looks like a real movie. Yeah, and we're in this big, beautiful house. Lots of dolly shots. Lots of very unorthodox, strange. These guys hanging off the top of the balcony trying to get the right angle down the stairs, and really cool stuff.
Right on. And that comes out in September?
September, we're doing an online release. Again, we're, going to put it out in the festival market. I kind of learned a lot from doing the Kickstarter thing and just going through that. And
you're going to have like a movie party or anything? Like,
we're going to have a release, in, I want to say late August, early September. We don't know the venue yet. We're still working on the venue, but if you go to Facebook and do the Head Over Heels short film,
that's the URL.
That's the URL.
Okay, I'll get the links on the show notes and everything like that.
Do all that, and you can kind of follow that. You could also go to the Damn Movie Podcast, and I'll throw shit up there as well.
Up there too. Yeah.
Like I said, I learned a lot doing the Kickstarter thing. As far as putting it out there, especially at this day and age. Like I spent probably, you think, oh, cool, I'm going to submit this movie to all these festivals and all these people are going to see it. In reality, more people are going to probably see it if you put it on YouTube than if you put it out there. And festivals cost a shitload of money.
Yeah. To be part of it?
Just to play the game. Like,
that you're not even
mean you're
part of it. You submit, when you submit, there's a fee. For each
so can you go back and now your other film, is that on YouTube? Can people watch that on YouTube?
Yeah, Harlan's on YouTube.
Harlan's on YouTube and Vimeo. There's a trailer for Head Over Heels out, but like I said, September, this is 2013. So, we should have a live feed on there. There's, some avenues online for short film that are really cool, really nice, and can help you have like a decent online release rather than I spent half of that Kickstarter money on
just trying to
festival submission fees.
Did you have to do a Kickstarter for the current Head Over Heels?
No, that's what I'm saying. I kind of learned like so much of the Kickstarter. It sounds great, but you got to beg people for money, and you're like thinking some random person.
You feel like a hobo. You're
kind of
and then you're
like people are just browsing through like, oh, this looks cool. I'll give them $20, which really 95% of the money came from people I know. And me
from your mom.
Yeah,
totally.
It's true. And from begging people. And then, you have to give everyone rewards. So a lot of money went into making posters and DVDs.
Yeah, it's like the weirdest zero-sum philosophy.
So you really wouldn't recommend Kickstarter. It's a great tool.
It depends on how much money you're trying to raise.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It probably depends on really what you're doing, I guess. Too.
I personally feel like that Kickstarter is brilliant if you already have a built-in fan base. Yeah. So like I'm right now
Spike Lee's doing it right now.
Spike Lee's doing it right now. Well, what I was going to say is I'm currently doing an album cover for the band Cub Country, Jeremy Chatelain's band. And it's a reward. It's this little 7-inch that's a reward to help press vinyl of the full 12-inch record. Mm-hmm. And so he really wants to do vinyl, but his whole thing is, well, I need to make sure that people would actually want to buy the vinyl, so I don't just sit on like 1,000 copies of a 12-inch record, but I also don't have the money. So basically what he did was he went on and said, look, the record's already done. Who would be willing to pay this amount for vinyl? And I'll throw in this handmade 7-inch.
Yeah.
And so all these people then say, oh, I'll buy it. And then you go, okay, until you eventually have the money. So it's more like a pre-order. Yeah. Right. And I think things like that and inventions are really good.
Or like a book or something like that.
But a lot of times,
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think what they're doing is amazing. It's really cool to have that. You wouldn't have had that 5 years ago. The thing that I figured out though is like our goal was $3,000. I would say probably 1,000 of that went towards, Amazon gets their cut, Kickstarter gets their cut. And then
Amazon takes some of the money?
Because they pay you. They're the ones who pay you. It's like their bank almost.
Really? See, I didn't know that. Yeah. I've never done a Kickstarter. I've known people.
But then you got to pay for all the awards. So I had to pay for Suri Whipple to do this badass poster. And it's great to have all this stuff. But at the same time, all this money could have gone towards the film itself.
Yeah.
And so we didn't go that route this time. But, and also the whole festival circuit, again, kind of got sour on it because I spent all this money to play the game and got zero interest. And, and you get the same email from every festival. And that's not to say the movie's bad or anything. I'm very proud of it. It's just, it's all about who you know sometimes and
connections,
and it's just like, you don't even know if they actually watched your fucking movie. So we're totally. Like they could just like, oh, we had to reject so many terrific movies this year and we have so many submissions. It's so easy to make a movie now. They got to sift through the shit. Just like it's, anyone can make a podcast, but it doesn't mean that anyone's going to listen to it. So.
Now, how hard would it be to get on like Netflix or something like that? Is that pretty tough to get a film on Netflix?
I'm not sure. That's definitely the
indie route. I wish they did
these
shorts.
Days.
That'd be great.
They don't really have a thing for shorts.
That's true. I didn't think of that.
I bet you can get a collection of shorts going, and if someone started a series of shorts, I bet you could get a lot. of really cool shit.
The Netflix thing, I think, is a great route. Just being I'm a huge fan of underground horror films, and
Netflix is documentaries, horror films.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's great.
Specifically for the underground horror scene, because horror is one of these strange genres where it gets its own film festivals. Yeah. Nothing else does. You don't have like rom-com film festivals, right? Like, I guess sci-fi also, horror and sci-fi. But for the most part, you either have your film festivals over here where you have your Sundance, your Telluride, your Tribeca, and then that's pretty much where everything goes. And a lot of times horror stuff doesn't even get remotely looked at over there. This is more like coming of age films and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Then you have your horror festivals over here, and a lot of things that have done really well at the horror film circuit, for festivals won't get picked up pretty much by anybody. Occasionally they do those after dark, or 10 films. The Bloody Disgusting does like 10 films. Shit, I can't think of it now, but they do a couple series a year. But lately what's been happening is these producers have been bypassing all that stuff, going right to Netflix, and it goes to the instant watch, and then people review it from that, and all of a sudden the numbers bump way up on Rotten Tomatoes because people are like, oh, that looks like it might be interesting, and then they watch it and they're like, oh my God, that was great. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, it had already won all these awards over here, but nobody had the money to do anything with it. Yeah. And it's even like, what do you do with it now? You don't go like straight to DVD is like now an obsolete term.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even use that term anymore because you're like, who the hell buys?
Straight to Netflix.
Yeah. Other than Palcher, who buys DVDs?
That's true. Yeah. I've committed. It's too late now.
You're going to be buried.
DVD collection.
He's going to be buried with all of them.
Yeah.
I had to commit.
Have you guys watched that new, the new Orange is the New Black or whatever?
My wife is going crazy about it. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm like 3 episodes in. It's a pretty good show.
I know I've seen a thing about it, but I haven't actually.
It's actually pretty good. It's weird just talking about Netflix.
I love the new model, man. The Killing. That's an awesome show.
Yeah.
2 seasons of it on Netflix.
The thing is,
House of Cards.
So
that was
much content out there, and it's like now. And if you do something that doesn't resonate, people are like, oh, all right, whatever. I'll move on to the next thing and forget about it. It doesn't get passed around or doesn't get watched or reviewed or whatever. And so, it's all about quality content.
It totally is.
Necessarily mean.
Well, and that's kind of
on Netflix. You're a star now. But
well, and that's hard too because the new film Head Over Heels, it's a short and it's a suspense. I guess would be
Yeah.
You could call it, I mean, I wouldn't call it like horror, but
Do you guys care if I put a preview of it up on the
no,
the show
please.
notes
That'd
too?
be awesome.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
I'll put that up on the show notes too, so people could check that out there.
The thing is, though, is it's slow.
Yeah.
It's a really, really slow build with very, very little that happens because you have to set up all this ambiance. You have to set up all this, this
hard to do
tension.
in a short.
And it's hard to do in a short, but I also like, you're
still
talking
tell a
about now. And I'm like, oh God, we're screwed. Cause like there's you're asking people to sit and just, there's a wonderful storytelling, website out there called Cowbird. And, anybody that hasn't checked it out, I highly recommend checking it out because they do these small form stories, that are either audio, so they're like short form podcasts, they're personal stories people tell, or they're actually text. And it's a beautiful, beautifully laid out website. But I heard an interview on, to the best of our knowledge with the creator. And they said, why did you name it Cowbird? And he said, well, I wanted to find the happy medium between artistic expression and the internet. And the internet, everything is right now, right? Like 2 seconds, boom, we got to get to it. And he's like, so that's the bird. And he's like, but a novel. And not Kindle. He's like, but sitting down on your couch and reading a novel.
Turning pages.
That's a steak. That's the cow. And so I wanted to find the place where you can click on it, instantly get it, and then you sit down, you relax. You don't try to do 15 things at once and you actually read it or you actually listen to it. And I just loved that concept because I feel like we are starting to slip away in a lot of ways from those things where it's like, if you put on a podcast and you're not instantly hooked, you're like, nah, and you just like get rid of it. And you're like, whoa. It might have been going somewhere. There might have been something good there.
No, I mean, I've been known to quickly delete a podcast.
I do it too. I'm not saying I don't do it, but it's like, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, shit.
But if you can get the content, and even if it is long-winded or, I don't know, just slow, like I've always thought that having a director commentary podcast would be amazing because I would love to sit and listen to P.T. Anderson talk about Boogie Nights for 2 hours. And even if you're not watching the movie, what he's saying is still crazy inspiring.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure all that stuff is copyrighted in some format. But just putting all the director commentaries of random movies and just put out something like that seems like something that people would get into. And even if it is 2 hours, this is like, but it's this guy that I love.
Yeah.
He's talking about a movie that I love.
That'd be a great idea. I wonder.
That is a good idea.
So it's just like it's that medium between finding what works and what will stick with people that'll keep them with you.
Yeah, and I might be being a little bit spurious because, like, shit, man, people listen to our show and like it takes 2 hours and doesn't get anywhere.
Like, what did I just do? Wasted my time listening to that fucking show.
They're still laughing about that dick joke, right?
Anyways, back to Head Over Heels. People can find that online roughly around the end of August, beginning of September.
The guy that we hired for the actor is actually from Chicago, and I submitted it to the Chicago International Film Festival, and they're one of the few remaining festivals that won't accept you if you've released it online. Whether I hear from them or not, it's going to probably be the 16th of September. People should be able to get online and search for either my name or Head Over Heels short film and find it on Vimeo.
And is it just going to be free to watch?
Yeah.
But I'm sure, if you like it, send a little donation or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to. But
honey.
This is a labor of love for us,
Do you like making movies or podcasts better? Or is that a tough question?
That is a tough question, actually. It's different. It's very different.
Yeah,
just different mediums.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to put a podcast out than a movie.
Yeah,
it is. It's a lot of work to put a movie out, and you got to depend on a lot more people. We're here. I just have to depend on this guy.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also, I guess and I'd even look at it in the bigger scope of just audio storytelling versus visual storytelling, I think that a serialized podcast is a great way to create a really intimate audience over a long period of time. We have a bigger following than I've ever had with any of the music I've ever done.
Really?
Oh yeah,
absolutely,
easily. And it's getting close to being the longest running thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Even beyond, it's beating out most of the bands.
But that's what's great about a podcast. You could take a break if you want to.
Yeah, totally.
It's not
totally.
like it's
and you don't have to count on 5 people coming to practice.
Well, but on the flip side, of that, I think what keeps you diligent and continuing to do it is that you feel an obligation to
your audience.
Yeah. And that's what keeps me going, man. It's crazy. love doing it, and it's super fun. But there are those times that it becomes, like just barely. Palcher moved, and so we were on hiatus for about a month. We were getting emails from people who are just like, "Where are you?" And like that's really a fascinating thing to have happen. But I love doing storytelling in whatever form, and I think that even critique in its own way is storytelling, because we're learning new things about ourselves and about artists and about expression when we do the show. When we make our films, that's a different form of that. But in a way, it reflects upon the first, because like again, Harlan, I feel like is sort of a different animal entirely. Whereas Head Over Heels, there was a lot of conversation about tone and about different scenes and about symbolism and about pacing and in it, a lot of the time, what would come up are things we had talked about on the show. Like, well, we want it to be like this, this scene should totally be like, remember that great scene that we loved in Scenes from a Marriage? This over here, this would be great if it had this feel of a 1 hour photo. If you know what I mean? And so we're really batting around these bigger themes that we sort of discussed doing the show.
And to me, the most important thing that any filmmaker can do is be inspired.
Yeah.
Watch movies. Because going back to our cinematographer, Mike, we drop movie lines all the time, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
He didn't know what the term found footage meant.
Yeah. And it's like, what does that mean? Yeah. And
we're like, just hold the camera like it's you. And he's like, oh, okay.
Blew us away that, I'm like, how do you, because he's the most motivated of all of us.
Oh my God, I know.
Done. And I'm just like, what keeps you going? Like, what inspires you to keep going, And to me, doing the podcast kind of inspires me to keep making movies.
Yeah.
Because it's just so important to see what's out there, the history of film, why things worked, and really for us, as far as the podcast goes too, it's more about the conversation than the movie.
I would agree with that.
Because a lot of people feel like they're sitting in the room with us and having a beer with us or whatever when we talk about a certain film. Like, we get that feedback all the time. And that appeals to some people, doesn't appeal to some, others.
Some people want this
perfectly produced.
Yeah, or even if it's not the because that's just it. It's like I mean, I do audio engineering as part of my job, and yet when we do our show, I'm like, hey, go ahead and check it. Sounds good. Okay, let's go, because that's the way our show should sound.
Just kind of raw and just in your
And
just a couple dudes hanging out, watching movies.
Hanging out. Yeah, exactly. And so, and I agree. I think that in a lot of ways, it's not about the movie as much as it is about the experience of the conversation and looking at because I do think that pop culture and art and all of these things say so much about us. It says so much about the human experience. So anytime that you start having that conversation, we have people that have been listening to us since 2007 that feel like they really know us, never met us in person. And in some instances, I don't even understand how they enjoy the show, because they're from a different country where English is the second language. Yeah. And yet, we have these people that are like, oh, I love it, and like,
they love your voice.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. Well, we have people that congratulate you when you had a child.
Yeah.
Isn't that mind blowing?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is
insane.
It really, it's like you created a family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I wish that this would have been around. Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I'm the first person that's like, why wasn't the internet around when I was a kid? Yeah, right.
I'm glad the internet wasn't around when I was a kid.
Anyways, though, before we wrap up here, I always like to get people I bring on, especially since I talk to people in Salt Lake City. What do you like about Salt Lake? I mean, what are some of your favorite things just about the city in general?
Gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Totally underrated. I think after you live here for a while, you kind of forget the mountains are there. And, I go and visit my family who is from Kansas City. I don't even know which direction I'm.
It's like north, south, east, west.
I get so lost on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's super underrated. I think there's, there's amazing people here.
You guys both grew up here, spent your whole life here.
He has. I grew up in Kansas City mostly, and moved a lot when I was a kid, but mostly Kansas City.
I gotcha.
I like being a bigger fish. I feel like that you get into. And I mean, I love San Francisco. I'd love to live in New York. I'd love to live in Portland or Seattle or Chicago. But the problem is that for me is I feel like that you could go and work really hard to like, you know, you make a series of paintings and you go get them hung up at a gallery and you're like so proud of it. And literally there could be people that would walk right past that gallery, maybe people that would even love it, love your paintings, and have no fucking clue that like that gallery even exists because they're going to another one that's a block down, right? I like living in a city where if you make a thing, there are other people in that city that are like, well, we got to go talk to that guy because he's doing this thing. Yeah. And not that I need it for the ego stroking as much as I need to feel like I'm a part of a community.
Which it's really easy to happen.
Which it's really easy to have here.
And it's one of the awesome things about the city.
I've also, a show he used to host, there's a random clip on there where we talk about Salt Lake City, and I always said it was the pit of wasted talent because we're not necessarily near a lot of other bigger cities. Yeah. So less people tend to come to Salt Lake for, like, say, go on tour for a band because you got to drive 4 hours each way to Vegas or to Denver, however long it takes to get. So there's so many talented people, but going on a tour or something like that is not the same if you live in Buffalo, New York, when there's, no,
you can go on tour and sleep in your bed every night. If you're from Buffalo.
And there's so many talented people, but there's a lot of effort you got to put into actually getting yourself out there too. But I agree, the big fish in this,
I just prefer that.
Pond again,
plus,
content.
I think that I know amazing artists, musicians, writers who were so busy being a person that lived in LA that they produced nothing. Being so busy being a person living in New York City.
So busy stuck in traffic.
Just so busy, trying to be there, right? And whereas here it's like my rent is relatively cheap. My job is really good and I don't have to worry about a lot of that crazy stuff. And so instead, I literally get to spend my every waking moment working on the things I care about, whether that's music or art or podcasting or whatever it is that like, I feel like if I was
one of the craftiest people you will ever meet. I go into his house, the amount of shit he's made out of paper mache.
What's that? Mod
Podge?
Are you a Mod Podge lover?
Not so much paper. Well, there are some paper mache things, but like I've been working on a series of puppets right now. That's more for work, but I'm always doing I've been doing a lot of scoring. I'm actually working on a musical with a couple of friends right now. And so I just like to be able to do those things. And I feel like that.
Yeah, you scored the James Franco thing?
I did a score for, the James Franco and, Christina Voros documentary, The Director about Gucci. It was just at Tribeca this last round.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did some scoring for that. And so, but I just feel like that I get the freedom to do a lot of that kind of stuff,
Living here in Utah or just
absolutely.
in general?
Living in Utah.
Yeah.
You're right, though. Like something as small as traffic, people are stuck in traffic in LA for
it's hours. I can get to work in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it depends where you work, but you don't have to worry, well, shoot, am I going to get stuck in, rush? I mean, I guess if you live south or something like that, you can get stuck in traffic, but our traffic here is so many.
There was, I remember years and years of playing music. It's like, Positively Forestry where the old, old ranch used to be and all that right there in the corner. Had practice spaces there for years and years and years. And it was just like, you'd go in and you'd make your music and you'd write stuff and you could stay there all night if you wanted to, writing and working on things. I have friends that have stories about living in Brooklyn and renting a practice space per hour and having to run in with all their gear to set up and be able to practice
because they run it all back out. Hour out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they had to move all their stuff back out. And that, that hour was just, the 2 hours or whatever they had it was just this exorbitant amount of money. You think about that and it's just no, for some people that's their thing and that's awesome. And I'm not, I'd never say anything to take away from their experience if that's what they want. For me, I'd rather pay a fairly small amount of rent for a house that literally has a room that when we were looking at houses, me and my wife were like, well, I have to have a room to podcast. And, that was really important. And so I prefer that. Yeah. So, yeah.
And again, amazing people. Almost everybody. We've had the same group of friends forever, obviously. And, I couldn't, those years at Kilby, I wouldn't trade for the world.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of wasted summers and just crazy stories. And when you live at Kilby, you get to go to every show for free.
Yeah.
And so just the amount of bands that we saw and, just fun times. Like I remember one time we were partying and somebody came up with the idea to block the sun with beer cans. And so everyone there was like 200 Natty Light cans on the roof.
Oh, God.
Like terrible idea. But shit like that. I wouldn't trade for the world.
Those were the days of Kilby Court.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
The first couple of years.
We didn't block the sun, by the way.
No, it didn't work.
Wasn't successful.
The very first couple of years before Phil Sherburne was able to actually get above board and licensed, when they do shows and half the people would pay, half of them wouldn't, and everybody'd bring like a 12-pack of beer.
Those were the days.
Those were the days, which to talk about now is like so long ago. So long ago.
Like a long
My
time.
students go to Kilby now, and I'm just like, oh yeah, okay. I used to live
try
there,
to
and they're like,
I try
when?
to still get down there when I
Yeah.
can. Though.
I do
You know,
occasionally.
when I go,
I
very
like to
nostalgic.
support them. It's a great thing. They're
Yeah,
all ages,
absolutely.
It's
Playing in Pleasure Thieves, we practice in our old living room.
Well, that's true. You guys do.
So.
No, I get very nostalgic when I go down there for
Yeah.
sure because I have so many memories, but I also don't know anybody.
it's a whole different scene.
It's
a whole
16-year-old kids.
Yeah.
It is. It's high school kids.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's great. It's for
We're
them.
sounding
Now.
like Andy Rooney right now.
Oh my God, I know. What is it with kids and all their different colored hair?
Well, I appreciate you guys coming. I
Yeah,
mean, I could
thanks.
sit here and I could talk to you guys all night, seriously. But
We're long-winded.
how can people get in touch with you? Run down the list, contact information. I'll get all those on the show notes.
A damn podcast at gmail.com and
Your website, right?
or you could go to adampodcast.com
Get all the
and
old shows there.
yeah, all the old shows there.
Facebook.
We also have for our 200th episode coming up. We did this for the 50, the 100, and the 150. Right? People can go online and they can actually vote for which movie they want us to do. And what are the choices?
Jaws, The Godfather, and Lord of the Rings. We haven't done any of those. So we're
So people listening can go vote.
They can go and vote.
whatever
Yeah.
they want us to review, we'll do.
I'm going to go vote.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah, definitely.
What movie don't you want to review? That's the one I'll
We
vote for.
tried that before.
No, we actually do that. If you donate $20,
Oh, yeah.
send
This,
Sherlock the worst movie you can think of, and he'll review
and
it.
I'll review it.
He
yeah.
did. What did you do? The Turkish Star
The
Wars.
Turkish Star Wars. I just did, or better known as The Man Who Saved the World. That's actually the name of
Dude, I'm in.
Turkish Star
I'm
Wars.
going to find, I'm gonna find the worst movie.
I've done Cobra. I made you once did what was it? Sorority Babes and the Dance-a-thon Death. That was a good one.
I made you do Karate Dog once.
I did do Karate Dog. Little known fact, Karate Dog starring Pat Morita and the voice of Chevy Chase as Karate Dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta
You know
pay
how
for that
shitty a
cocaine
movie.
somehow.
You know how shitty a movie has to be. Like even the basketball playing dog was called Air Bud. Like at least at least they thought for like a minute about like we can't just call it basketball dog because that'd be stupid. That these guys were like that it was like, did Chevy come in the last day? He's like, what are you guys gonna call? And they're like, we don't care, just Karate Dog. It's got to go to press right now. It's VOD. It has to go up today, or else they won't let us. Karate Dog.
I've never even heard of it.
It's fantastic.
the
It's
trailer.
so bad.
It's shitty.
It's so bad. It's like, you remember how there was like the one limited edition of Blade Runner where they made Harrison Ford go in and do the narration. You could just hear how much he hated it. That's what the entire movie sounds like for Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
Like that he's standing in a sound booth somewhere with headphones on like, I was Clark fucking Griswold and now I'm the Karate Dog. What happened?
All right,
Anyway,
and again,
tangential. Sorry.
No,
go to YouTube.
I love it. I love it.
Go to YouTube or Vimeo if you want to see Harlan. It's about 15 minutes long. Head Over Heels will be live September 17th, unless I get into the Chicago International Film Festival. So I'm putting more money on the online release.
I'll be available the 12th through the 15th, unless I do get to go to the Grammys. That's essentially what you just said, right?
Yeah, but the reason I say that is because Maddie, the main actor, has a pretty decent following. So, and he's from there. So we're hoping something comes
It's
out of
okay.
it.
No,
Yeah, look for it online September 16th. And then also, you can go to Facebook /Head Over Heels short film if you want to follow, what we're doing and what the film's doing.
That was a lot of info.
Shut
that was
up.
good.
Hopefully they pulled over and wrote it all down.
Yeah, I hope so.
If you're driving and listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, you can always just scroll back through it because we're on a podcast.
Yeah.
Damn right.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on. Seriously.
Thanks for having us.
No, I
Thanks,
had a blast.
Many thanks goes out to Adam and Adam for coming on the podcast, sharing their story, sharing a damn movie podcast story, as well as their film Head Over Heels that's going to be coming out in September. So you're going to want to make sure to check that out. They're going to be showing it at Kilby Court Sunday, September 15th at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Mark that on your calendars. Follow me on Twitter at I Am Salt Lake. I'll keep you guys up to date on that, as well as anything else going on in Salt Lake City. Again, the show notes, iamsaltlake.com/episode 89. That way you can connect with Adam and Adam in their podcast. Check it out, download it, find it on iTunes. Great podcast to listen to. And I highly urge you to subscribe to that and check it out. Great podcast here from Salt Lake City. My email, iamsaltlake@gmail.com. Drop me an email if you know somebody or if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of the show. Love to bring you on. Love to share your story. Love to just bring you on the show. So drop me an email. Tell me what you think of the show. Tell me what you're all about. Also, voicemail, 385-202-5926. Also, just want to quickly share, you guys get free shipping on any Zag product. If you click on the banner on the iamsaltlake.com website, you get free shipping on any Zag product, as well as you help out the podcast as well. So I think that's going to do it for episode 89. I'm going to end the episode playing a song by Pleasure Thieves. The title is Blackhearts. I'll be back again on Thursday with a brand new episode showcasing something or someone in Salt Lake City. Thank you so much for listening. This is Pleasure Thieves.